We'll turn now to the growing battle over voting rights. A group of Georgia House Republicans is canceling Coca-Cola. They're saying Pepsi is okay after the company's CEO spoke out against the state's new restrictive voting law. They wrote this letter, take a look at it, asking for all Coke products to be removed from their offices. And Governor Brian Kemp remains defiant, vowing not to back down.
I want to be clear. I will not be backing down from this fight. Major League Baseball, Coca-Cola, and Delta may be scared of Stacey Abrams, Joe Biden, and the left, but I am not.
So does this corporate backlash, including Major League Baseball pulling their All-Star game out of Atlanta, serve as a warning to other states right now that are considering their own restrictive voting bills? We are joined now by Greg Bluestein to discuss. He's a political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Eric Mitchell, sports analyst and president of LifeFlip Media. Good morning to both of you, gentlemen. Greg, we'll start with you. And you write that the Georgia House Speaker recently admitted what no Georgian would ever conceive of. He cracked open a Pepsi. You also write, aghast. The Georgia House Republicans voted to strip Delta of its tax break in the area. Of course, that later stalled in the state Senate. But what's the fallout here for these companies in Georgia who've come out against this law? Is it enough to cause them to backtrack or maybe scare others from speaking out?
That's the goal for these Republican supporters of this law, is to send a kind of a shot across the ballot. These major Atlanta companies that get incentives like Delta does. Delta gets this jet fuel tax break. And so Republicans, the last day of the session, just a few days ago in the Georgia Capitol, wanted to send that message to Republican law, to Delta, to Coke, and to other companies that are still on the sidelines, basically not to come out against this legislation, or else they could risk some blowback from state lawmakers.
Next thing you know, they'll bring back freedom fries from 20 years ago. Eric, in the meantime, how did Major League Baseball, that announcement, land in the world of sports? Do you kind of expect others to follow suit?
Absolutely. This is going to continue if these other states want to do it. And keep in mind, Texas is already planning on doing this, and American Airlines, who's based in Dallas, already came out with a statement that they do not support any measures that copy anything like Georgia's doing. And which I find is ironic is Governor Kemp just did that whole photo shoot yesterday and this speaking out against Stacey Abrams, who, by the way, did come out against this boycott and said that she didn't agree with it because of the economic impact it was going to have on the Atlanta area and the hotels and the businesses and everything. And he also, this is interesting that at least this time he had a little bit of everybody in the photo with him, besides doing it behind closed doors when he was signing the bill. So it's interesting that he's a brave little toaster on Friday and Saturday, but this isn't going to affect the other places. And like Arizona, the players are all going to stand up for this. Voter suppression isn't anything that these athletes are going to stay silent about.
Well, and Eric, one event that's not moving is the Masters tournament. It's going to still be held in Atlanta this week. And PGA of America said they're not going to move it because of their financial commitment to charity and the local community there. But they also say it shouldn't be construed as indifference here. But what's behind the decision for PGA not to move the Masters, and how is it being received?
You know, the Masters is different. We're talking short notice. The Masters is this bill was passed a week ago, and here we are sitting a week before it happened.
It was passed a week ago, but it had been discussed before. A lot of people saying too little, too late for these people.
But they waited too long, and it's hard to move the Masters. And I guess for PGA, from what I'm hearing there, is it was too difficult to do. They have a commitment. They gave a whole bunch of their reasons why they're doing it. And PGA is different. I mean, we haven't seen the PGA stand up for very much when it comes to social justice. We haven't seen the Major League Baseball do this until just now. This is the first for them. They've been embedded in their own scandals with cheating and the performance-enhancing drugs, if we remember that just a few years ago. So seeing baseball stand up and stand with their friends over in the NBA and in the NFL, this is the PGA is doing their own thing, and they have their reasons. But again, I'm going to go back and believe that Major League Baseball is the one that affects more of this fight. And you're going to see it now with the NFL, with the Atlanta Falcons. But you have two other states that have a lot of big sports and a lot of everything going on in their community. To see them come back, and they're going to be watching what's going on in Georgia. And Georgia probably shouldn't take this aggressive stance that they're taking towards all of these folks, because a lot of people agree, and the athletes aren't going to tolerate it. But keep in mind this, we're talking about the Atlanta area and Georgia and Hank Aaron, right? Hank Aaron passed, the All-Star game is going to honor him. But remember, in Georgia, his life was threatened and took death threats as the man was breaking Babe Ruth's record.
Right.
He had to deal with tons of racial threats going on. So this is kind of ironic we're talking about this.
Yeah, it is kind of ironic. But let's talk about the messaging, Greg, because you're down there and you know what is winning. The Republicans are framing the backlash as an example of cancel culture. But you actually have the lieutenant governor himself of Georgia who kind of is citing and understanding why these companies are pulling out. And you've seen some diverging statements from the opposite side of the political spectrum, though, in the meantime, including former President Obama and Trump. You see their statements there. Former President Trump saying don't go back to their products until they relent. And former President Obama, congratulations to MLB for taking a stand on behalf of voting rights for all citizens. Who's winning this battle?
Yeah, this is the challenge that Democrats are going to face now, because Republicans are going to try to pin this economic blowback squarely on Democrats. Democrats, I feel like, have been winning the narrative overall on the elections legislation for weeks now, in part because Republicans themselves passed a much more restrictive bill that helps set the stage for the debate. But now Republicans are going to be saying that all these events that might be this domino effect that might be facing Georgia will be Democrats' fault. So Democrats now are going to be under the gun a little bit, under pressure a little bit to push back about that. And as we've talked about, Stacey Abrams and other leading Democrats have opposed boycotts. Stacey Abrams in particular has said boycotts are not necessary yet, and she's instead urging companies to speak out against legislation in other states that might be pending to stop contributing to Republicans who support this legislation and to support federal elections overhauls right now. But still, it's a tricky spot for Democrats. And as you heard, Governor Kemp is going to do everything he can to pin the blame on them.
Yeah, I mean, we've got similar bills right now in Arizona and Florida. Arizona, the Super Bowl is supposed to be there in 2023. Miami, they're supposed to have the Soccer World Cup in 2026. Greg Bluestein and Eric Mitchell, so happy to have both of you early on this Sunday. Thanks for getting us started.
Thank you.